2 weeks away from the NFL draft kicking off in Green Bay, Wisconsin. We got a pretty good idea who's going to go number one. We have a decent idea who's going to be the second quarterback off the board, too. And in an interesting twist, for the first time I can remember, the same man trains both those quarterbacks. And he's going to join us right now. Darrell Colbert Jr., who somehow has time to come on this show, which I do appreciate, man. You've been through a whirlwind here. You're running showcases. You're running pro days. What has this experience been like for you?
Man, it's been a blessing, man. I appreciate you having me on. But, man, it's been a blessing. It's been fun, with these guys, taking them through this process and, them trusting me with this. This is huge. This is my first pro day as well. Cam's was my first one. Shedeur was, I call it 1A, 1B, got them 10 days apart. So it was good, man. It was fun, with those guys trusting me. We've been at it for a while. With Shedeur for about, 6 years and Cam for about 4.5 years. So for them to trust me and give me this opportunity to work with them going into pro day, getting them ready for the biggest throwing session of their lives to this point, it's been good.
All right, so let's start off by talking about Cam, who at this point, Titans continue to say they're still finalizing all those things. You can't announce the number one pick early. But I would be very, very surprised if he's not the number one pick to Tennessee. If indeed that is the case, what do you think the Titans are getting, knowing Cam as well as you do? And what do you think about the fit there in Tennessee?
I think it's a good fit, a special player. Man, he's been able to, go and beat him at 3 different stops. Of course, college is completely different from the NFL. But, he's been able to go and beat him and make plays and make teams better, getting the opportunity to go to UIW and turning their program around, especially, what he did that first year in the COVID year, and then going to Wazoo and breaking all those records and putting all those them numbers, and then going back to the U and bringing them back to relevance. So, just being able to do that, and as you can see, doing it with different guys. It didn't matter, if he had a whole bunch of 5 stars around him or 0 stars like he was still making everybody better. So he's a guy who's going to come in and make the team better, and a guy who wins football games. A special talent, being able to – he's the modern-day quarterback. All of the, different arm angles and all the stuff that he can do it makes him special. So Tennessee, if they end up going with Cam, they're going to get a special guy.
So 4.5 years ago, you start working with Cam. What was he like then? What were your first impressions, and what's allowed him to grow from being a guy who, even if he came out a year ago, would have been maybe a mid-round pick to now, quite possibly being number one?
Man, and I think this kind of answers both questions. If you ask him, literally till this day, if he would have went with his first mind and came out last year, he felt he was a first-round draft pick. He feels that. He still feels that to this day. We had a conversation the other day, and he was like, shoot, I would at least win 10. So that's just who he is. He has the confidence in himself. And that's what I saw the first day that, we were out here. I'm at the facility right now. We were out here training. That's the first thing I saw from him, just the confidence and the belief that he has in himself. Man, when we first worked out with each other, it was kind of seeing all the different arm angles that he throws from, ball dropping a little low at the time, and just a lot of different things. And I went into it. When we got done, I was like, man, all right, cool. We're probably going to have to change some of this stuff. But I was like, man, let me go watch his film again. And then I went to go watch his film, and I was like, okay, this what makes him who he is. Being able to throw from all these arm slots, all the off platform. That's what made him very special at the time when he was at UIW. So I'm like, man, we're not going to change any of this stuff. We're going to, find ways to make it better and hone in on it and perfect it and go from there. And I think that's what really helped us create our bond, because I feel like a lot of guys, that he might have worked with, wanted to, him to be this pro-style guy and do it the way that everybody else has done it. But, man, it was big for me to just come out and, see what he wanted to do and perfect that stuff and not change who he was and not change what made him special.
As you're describing the skill set, and as you said, Daryl, this is the modern day quarterback. I'm like trying in my mind's eye to envision who is the closest comp in the NFL. When you talk about switching all the arm angles, body type a little bit too, like Mahomes is the number one, even though it's blasphemy to compare anybody to Mahomes. Like, who's the comp for Cam Ward in your mind?
Man, when he went into Miami last year, I did an interview with one of the Miami people, I think On3, and told him, he asked me about a comparison. I was like, I'm not saying that this kid is Patrick Mahomes, but the play style is Patrick Mahomes. How they, like you said, how they look, the build, but just all the different arm angles, all the off-platform stuff that Pat does, Cam does. The baseball background that Cam has, Patrick Mahomes has. So all the different things, and he watches Patrick Mahomes. So he sees that, okay. And that's what I think gave him, a lot of confidence as well, seeing Pat go into the NFL and not change who he was and consistently, throw at all the different arm angles, do all the different things that he did that's making him successful. And he like, okay, shoot, I do the same stuff, So that's my comparison. Of course, Caleb Williams does a lot of that stuff as well, but my comparison would be Patrick Mahomes. And I'm not saying he's Patrick Mahomes, but his play style is very close, very close.
Well, I remember too, way back when Mahomes came out, which was 2017, and I was talking to Davis Webb, who had known and played in the same system at Texas Tech, and he was like, the one kid in your neighborhood who can just do it. You go out on the playground, you go in the backyard, and you just do it. That's Pat. And I had a coach tell me something very similar about Cam, which is, you mentioned the baseball background. He played multiple different sports. When you get him, Shedeur, and yourself as a former college quarterback too, are there competitive moments between that group, even non-football stuff that you guys do?
Man, everything, literally everything is competitive. It's like, if it's weight room stuff, if it's conditioning, if it's, of course, the throwing stuff, if it's, we got a basketball hoop out here. Of course, he tells everybody if he wasn't playing football, he'd be going pro in basketball. That's how he feels. But he does come from a basketball family, so I can understand that. But literally everything is competitive. If it's playing a video game, Madden, whatever it is, like everything is competitive. Like that's just the nature. If it's, we leaving here and headed, like the other day, leaving here and headed to the PT place, all right, I'm gonna get there. They say I'm gonna get there in 15 minutes. I'll be there in 14 minutes. Like just little things. Everything is competitive. That's just who he is, and that's just his mindset. That's just the type of guy he is. Like literally anything you can think of. If it's fishing, if it's whatever it is, he's a competitive guy. That's just who he is.
Tell me about Shedeur. You've known him a little bit longer. You said 6 years. So we're talking. You get him in high school. You obviously, you know who his dad is. You know the lineage and all that stuff. What do you remember about the very first time you met Shedeur Sanders?
So very first time I met him, he was actually in middle school and I was at SMU. So his oldest brother, who does all the video stuff, Deion Jr., me and him went to SMU together. He's like 2 years older than me. So when I came in, me and him created a good relationship together. And so Shedeur, even back then, Shedeur used to always want to just come work out. So he used to come work out. Of course, his brother played receiver at the time, so he would come to SMU and throw with him. And so when I got there, me and him created a relationship. He would come out and come throw with me when I was out there throwing, or come work out with me. And then when I got back to his mom lived in Houston. So on different, Christmas break, summer breaks, I'm from Houston, so I would come back home to Houston, and he would call me and be like, "Hey man, come pick me up from my mom's house. I want to come work out with you." So we had created a bond from there. And then once I got done playing ball and got into training, I told him, he was like, "Shoot, I'm training with you. I want to train with you." We had a great relationship. Of course, the stuff that we were doing, it was when I was working out with him, was a lot of the same stuff we were going to be doing. A lot of the same stuff we were going to be doing in training. So, man, he was comfortable with it. So we kind of got from there. He drove down to Houston one of the first times before the season, and we started working, and then we just built it up from there.
You've seen and read, I'm sure, all the stuff about the questions in terms of Shedeur and how he's going to fit. He is hyper confident. There is no doubt about it. You talk to him for 2 minutes. You can see that. For some people, that borders into cockiness. They wonder, how's that going to play if you're a 22-year-old kid walking into a locker room full of 30-year-old men who have been doing this for a long time. For people who have those questions about how Shedeur is going to fit into an NFL culture, what would you tell them?
Man, I think for a quarterback, you want a guy like that. You want a guy who's sure in what he can do. You want a guy who's confident in himself. You want a guy who's never second guessing himself. If he's going out there to play, and that, okay, cool, he's not worried, so we're not worried. And that's who Shedeur is. Literally, Shedeur's he's played four years of football with 6 different offensive coordinators, and been successful. Has the highest completion percentage in NCAA history. So man, just who he is, he understands the system. He's not a guy who, I feel like he's a guy who can fit in any system, whatever type of system that a team is running. But I think the biggest thing is just his confidence in himself sets everything apart. It's not any game that he's played that he doesn't feel like he's out of, because he understands the game. He's seen so much football, so he understands it, and he's comfortable back there, man. So I think just the type of guy he is and that confidence, yeah, it can offend some people, but, it's who he is, and that's what makes him special, So I think a lot of guys, and you see it on social media and all that stuff, but I think the guys in the locker room, like he's been in, 2 different locker rooms, all the changes that they've made, and they haven't had any problems in the locker room yet. Now, of course, that's college, not the NFL, but I think it's going to carry over to the NFL as well. He'll be able to relate to each guy in the locker room from all different walks of life, but that's just who he is, He's a confidence guy, and, when he gets out there, he's going to be very confident. I feel like, if their quarterback's confident, especially coming in as a rookie, then everybody else around him will be confident.
Knowing that he's Deion's son, if you'd never seen him play, I would think most people would assume he's like his dad, right? He's flash and he's running all over the place. He's played more like Cam, frankly. But Shedeur, he's at his core, he's a pocket passer. He's accurate within the pocket. He doesn't have elite athletic ability, let's call it that. He's not going to be making a ton of things happen with his legs. Who is the comp in your mind, and how does he end up playing stylistically in the NFL?
Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow is a great fit. I had one of the guys from Colorado actually brought that up last year when I was trying to kind of figure out who kind of fit who Shedeur was, and I think that was a great fit. Just the way Joe Burrow is always confident, always calm. Like Shedeur is always this. He's one of the guys who's literally always that. He never gets too high, never gets too low. Joe does a great job of being accurate and understanding the system. And then what I think the comparison really works is, what was that? The year that Joe and them went to the Super Bowl, he was sacked a lot. I think he was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL and was still productive. That's who Shedeur was, last year, being sacked over 50-something times and still being productive, still at the top of all the quarterback statistics, and different things like that. So, how accurate Joe is, same thing with Shedeur. Very sneaky athletic, same thing with Shedeur. So I think that's a great fit for him.
Those sacks can add up, though, too. Burrow has gotten beat up, and he tore his ACL at one point. For Shedeur, are there things in your mind that he still needs to improve, whether it's the processing ability, whether it is just, learning coverages? Like, what are some things, not that it's all on him taking sacks, but what are some things that he still can get better at as he moves forward here?
Man, I think from the learning coverages standpoint, man, I think he's one of the guys who understands coverages at a great level. And I think that just goes from, who his dad is. He's been learning coverages for a long time, and he's been around some guys who have taught him a lot. So he understands it. He understands the game from a whole different lens that a lot of people don't get to understand it from. But a lot of things he needs to work on. Of course, it gets to a point where, you've been sacked so many times and different things like that. You want to be able to, get the ball out a little quicker and different things like that. There's a lot of things that he understands that going into the next level, going into the NFL, that he'll have to change, that he'll have to get better at. And he's working on that. Those are things that, of course, working on the pro day stuff, but those are things that he wants to work on, a lot more rhythm stuff, a lot of different things that, he understands that I have to be better at the next level to be successful.
Well, where Shedeur goes is one of the great mysteries, not to spoil my own segment that's coming up in a little bit here. It's one of the biggest questions, though, going into the draft. He's taken a bunch of visits. I believe he's in Pittsburgh with the Steelers today. Do you have a sense? Do you have a guess on where this all lands for Shedeur?
Man, I don't know. It's just crazy how you go from, everybody at the end of the season saying, you're going to be at the latest, you're going number 3. And then now you're dropping and nothing has changed. You haven't played any football, so how does it change? That's what's crazy about all this stuff. And it's it's new, but he's been even killed with all this stuff. I think he just wants the opportunity, and of course, wants to go on the best fit for him. And I think however it works out is going to be a good fit. If it's the Browns at 2, or if it's where he's at right now in Pittsburgh, whatever it is, I think they all have good fits for him. I think it's a good opportunity for him to be successful very early. And so I don't think he's worried about it as much, but it's just crazy to me how, he hasn't played football in the last 4 months, and you go from being top 3 to now they're talking about you might not be top 3 and nothing has changed, So it's been interesting. You hear a lot of feedback from a lot of guys who've interviewed him and got to know him, and they have a lot of good things to say about him. A lot of people went into a lot of interviews, especially, around combine time, because you just see, all the Instagram posts and what they put out on YouTube, and you don't really know who he is. But then a lot of those guys got to sit down with him and were like, oh, shoot, this is a great kid. He's a great guy. He, can articulate himself well, understands the game, can relate to everybody. He's a great guy, respect for all those different things. So it's just kind of crazy how that happens.
How's Coach Prime handling? I don't know how much you talk to him directly, but how's he handling just watching his son go into this process here? And Deion famously said on Draftway, if a certain team took him, they'd have to give him so much money that they'd put him on layaway. I know he's got strong feelings where he'd like it to go. How's he handling this?
From outside looking in, the conversation we had, he's comfortable with it because he's prepared Shedeur for all of this stuff. From he literally early on before this even started, he said, man, they're gonna come out with all kind of stuff about you that's gonna try to get you to drop so you can drop down to certain teams. And it's been true. Like everything he said has been true. So he's prepared him for this moment. So he's not worried about it. And like I said, Shedeur isn't worried about it. All the the reports that come out and different things like that, stuff that they're not worried about at all because literally, having a dad like him who's been through this stuff, he understood what was coming. So he was able to give him a heads up on all this stuff. And, now it's happening. And it's crazy that this stuff is actually happening exactly how he said it.
So last thing for you here, Daryl. All right, so you started working with these guys. You met Shedeur when he's in middle school. You've been working with Camps early in his college career. I know you got other guys in the pipeline. I want you don't have to make predictions, but I know there's going to be a guy or two that we're going to be talking about down the line. Do you have somebody else we're going to re-rack this clip in 2, 3, 4 years, be talking about them being a high draft pick?
Yeah, man. I think I got a kid guy who's done a lot of training with these two guys, Kyron Jones. He's at Virginia Tech. He got hurt this past year, so season didn't go as he wanted. He's a guy who's very special, has a lot of talent, has the arm strength, has the size, a lot of different things like that. And then also I got a young guy who, this is the first year where quarterbacks, not quarterbacks, but juniors were able to compete in the All-American games. That's more so just all for the seniors and different things like that. But I had a junior compete in, I think it's the Adidas All-American game this past December, and he won MVP. Kid named Keyshawn Henderson. He's 5-star on pretty much every site. Just depends on which one you're looking at. Top 5 and all of those, and he's committed to U of H right now. So that's a name to look out for. I think he's going to be very special when he gets to college. But of course, we got a lot of guys in the pipeline, but those are two guys that come to mind as a young guy and a guy who's, jumping into it after the season next year. Chris
Brockman sitting over here writing down Keyshawn Henderson. Do they have futures odds on that, Brockman, for number one pick? And you already I can't give gambling advice, of course.
No, of course not.
I'm just checking. I know where you're.
I tried to tell a lot of people when as we were working with these guys, Shedeur and Cam, that man, these guys were special and this was going to happen, that they were going to be, high draft picks, and people didn't believe me, so which I understand, it's. You feel like, you're a little too close to it, so you're just saying that because those are your guys, man. But these guys were special. I saw that from, early on working with them and the way that they go about the game and the way that they prepare themselves and, just their demeanor and their confidence that they have in themselves. So those other two guys have that. So I can see, if everything's go how it's supposed to go, that those guys could be in this situation as well.
Daryl, awesome stuff, man. Thanks a ton. I know it's a busy time, so thanks for taking a few minutes for us here.
Nah, for sure, Tom. Thank you, man. I appreciate y'all.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.